Did you know that most Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency? That's why having an emergency fund is more important than ever. Between inflation, layoffs, medical costs, home repairs, pet costs that were unexpected, having an emergency fund is no longer optional, it's foundational. In today's episode, we're diving in to all the nitty gritty details. Stay tuned and join us.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.
Welcome to the Sugar Daddy Podcast, where we help you build a financial plan so that you can feel confident in your money. Hey, babe.
Hey, how are you doing?
I am okay. How are you?
I'm good.
So it's very timely that we are talking about emergency funds today because earlier this week I came home and we had a $514 vet bill for Remy because we never get out of the vet for less than $400, and it was $514. And he has one like broken tooth and one chipped tooth, and they have to be extracted. And I feel like it's going to be a small mortgage payment, and I'm super ticked off about it.
Yeah, it's always something. And that's why
Always.
this episode is about making sure that you have a properly funded emergency fund and what that actually means.
Yes, because the one thing that we know for sure is that the emergency will happen,
Oh, yeah. It's not a
right?
matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yes. It's always, in December, I had a flat tire twice. Remember, we got back from Aruba and my car was literally tilted in the garage. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And luckily, we were able to just patch it. But in my head, I was
Well,
already like,
yeah. Well, no, we patched it we actually take it back. We did patch it.
didn't we patch
Yeah,
it twice?
we plugged it.
Plugged it twice. Yeah. So those were,
Yeah, that was your second
that was my second
in
one.
a matter of a month.
In less than a month. But what I'm saying is, in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, how much is this tire going to cost?
Yeah.
Because like the things happen. Or
Mhm.
then like we had something happen with the dryer and we were like, oh no, are we going to be able to fix it ourselves? And y'all, I will say one thing about Brandon, he loves him some YouTube University. And we were fine, and I'm very, very grateful, but, like, it's always something. If it's not the car, then it's an appliance. If it's not an appliance, it's a pet. If it's not a pet, it's always something, and we all know this to be true. And then on top of that, we have rising costs of everything, mass layoffs happening all over the place, job uncertainty. Like, it is just I feel like we're constantly just on edge waiting for the next thing to happen because it always feels like it's right around the corner.
Well, the thing is, too, is that an emergency fund is one of the foundational building blocks of a financial plan. A lot of the times people think about, honestly, I think the main thing that when people hear the word financial planning, they think about investing.
Yeah.
And investing is a long term. Like, you're not going to get rich tomorrow or even next year off of investing for 99.999% of people.
Mhm.
All right. So, emergency fund is a key fundamental part because emergencies happen all the time. So you need to build this up so that the rest of your plan works. Because if you can't get through an emergency tomorrow, say if something happens, you need $1,000, $2,000, you can't get through that emergency tomorrow. What good does, investing that's actually going to take you 20, 25 years to get to your goal? What good is that when you can't get through an emergency that could happen tomorrow?
Right. Well, and it's, so much of this, and I hate to say it, is just not fun.
No, I
You
mean,
know, like, it's
because
just not, it's not a fun way. It's not fun to put away money. You have to budget for your emergency fund, right?
yes,
It is an expense to put away money for savings.
yes.
That's what it is. You have to look at it that way. It is an expense, just like your water bill, just like your light bill, just like your car insurance. You have to plan for it. You have to put it away, and it's an expense that you need to account for. But just like, I don't, even though I know future Jess will thank me, I don't love seeing money come out of my paycheck for anything, whether it's taxes, whether it's Social Security, definitely not Social Security. I'm like, give me my money back, whether it's going towards my 401k. Like, I don't like seeing any money come out of my paycheck, but I know that it's like that necessary evil.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the first step as far as for an emergency fund is you need to make sure you understand what emergency fund is for and what it's not for.
Ooh, tell us.
That's the first step. So Define what an actual emergency is. And we've already talked about a few of them, job loss, medical issues, urgent repairs to say your home, your car, things of that nature. Now, what an emergency fund is not for is vacations, gifts,
The cute boots that are on sale.
and then even in a scenario, a planned expense. So for
Mm,
example, like if you're wanting to do a home repair in a year or two from now, you could start don't go into your emergency fund. Start to plan
mm,
for that.
mhm.
It's not something that urgent and just popped up. This is more of a want and something you want to do. Plan for it. The emergency fund is for those things that pop up that are unexpected and you need to address immediately.
I feel like you said that because I wanna get the house painted and our quote was $2,750.
That isn't why I said that. I wasn't even thinking about that, but
Okay.
that does make sense. That does fall into that because that could be a planned
It's
expense.
a planned expense, not an I mean, yeah, in my head, I'm like, "But we have it. We can just move the money." But no, that's not what that's for, and getting the house in the painted interior is not an emergency.
And the main reason behind defining what an actual emergency is and what is not an emergency is because when you're in the process of funding an emergency fund, if you're constantly using the money for things that aren't emergencies, then you kind of feel deflated and you're like, what is the purpose of this emergency fund? It feels pointless. It's like, yeah, because you're not doing it right.
You're you're doing it wrong.
you
Yeah,
know,
but people have a hard time taking money from their emergency fund even when they have
That
emergencies.
is true as well. You have people on one side, and you could completely swing the pendulum to the other side,
Mhm.
where you have people that are such uber savers that, when a proper emergency does happen, they're hesitant to use their emergency fund or they feel deflated because they're having to use their emergency fund. We're like,
Right.
this is what it was
This is
for.
what you this is
This is what this specific bucket
yeah,
was for.
yeah. Okay, so let's go into kind of the basics. Where should people start?
Well, first you determine how much you should have in your emergency fund.
Okay,
And,
how do we do
an
that?
easy rule of thumb could be, anywhere from 6 to 12 months worth of expenses. Now, listen to when I say expenses. I didn't say income.
Okay.
Six
Mhm.
to 12 months worth of expenses. Now, where the nuance comes is individual circumstances and your personal feelings. So, for example, are you a dual income household that, if one person loses a job, maybe the other person can still cover most of the bills? That will make a difference in regards to how much you need. Are you, a family of four and you have a single income where everybody's dependent upon one income? Then you might want to have a little bit more in your emergency fund than that 6 months and lead closer to that 12 month. Are you a business owner, an entrepreneur? You might want to have a little bit more in your emergency fund. Are you someone that's in an industry that has high turnover?
Mhm.
Maybe you want to have more in your emergency fund. And then also just comes personal preference. Someone might just want to have a little bit more, like based upon their needs. Maybe they only need 6 months, but like their comfort level is like, maybe I need 8 or 9. I just feel more comfortable. So you
Mhm.
can have that nuanced conversation. But the first thing is determining how much do you need, because that's going to be the goal that you set up for funding it. So you determine what is my ultimate goal, and then you simply can just do the math based upon your budget on how much you can contribute on a monthly basis towards that goal and how long it would take you to get there.
Mhm. I think one another call out too is depending on what your where your income comes from. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you, in a volatile industry? Like I work in tech and every single day, that I log into LinkedIn, I see that, another company has done mass layoffs. So if you know that you're in a field where it's going to be difficult to get rehired, things are taking significantly longer than they used to, you might want to add a little bit of extra padding in because you want to account for that nuance of the industry that you're in. Now, if you might be in an industry where maybe it's super niche, you can get hired the next day somewhere else, that's amazing and that's great. But those are all things I think that you need to consider.
Yeah. And I think we also need to, dispel some of the myths out there because
Like what?
$1,000 is not an emergency fund. It's a starter fund,
Oh, yeah.
but that is not an emergency fund. That
No.
is a place where you can maybe start,
Hmm.
but most emergencies are going to cost you more than $1,000.
Right.
Now,
Unfortunately. Yeah.
but what I do want to preface with that is that the main issue when it comes to having an emergency fund is not having too little of an emergency fund. It's actually waiting too long to even start one.
Mm.
So even though I'm talking about $1,000 is not a fully funded emergency fund, it is a starting place and it's better than nothing. So even if you don't have a lot to start putting towards an emergency fund, put something in place because it's going to be significantly better to have something than it is to have nothing.
Yeah, so don't be the person that says, "Well, I can't put a 500 or $1,000 into the emergency fund every month, so I'm just not gonna do anything." Instead, be the person that says, "Hey, I have $20 that I can put into this emergency fund this month. That's what I'm gonna do." Or, "Hey, this expense was less than I thought, so I have a little bit of money left over. I'm going to add this to my emergency fund."
And also, like a little bit of a sidebar here with that is the main purpose of the emergency fund is obviously to fund an emergency, but the even further step is so that you can fund an emergency so that you don't go into debt.
Right,
So that's one of the main reasons is that, like, if you don't have a properly funded emergency fund, maybe you have to take out a loan for something that's unnecessarily, and maybe the rates aren't favorable to you. You might actually end up racking more credit card debt in that scenario. So the emergency fund plays a bigger part in the financial picture than just, having this lump sum of money sitting there.
right. And speaking of having the money sitting there, your emergency fund should be sitting in a high yield savings account. We will link our favorites. The rates kind of are not as great as they were last year.
Still better than your, standard brick and mortar old school
Yeah,
bank.
if your money is sitting at the Wells Fargo and the Bank of Americas and even, at Chase or wherever, you are losing money. So get at least right now it's like about 3.5%. Sometimes it's up to last year we were getting mid fours, which
Yeah,
was really nice.
you need to keep it in a high yield savings account. There no other place you should really be keeping it.
Non-negotiable. We'll link our
Because
favorites.
also the thing is here is that the problem that I also often run into is that people need to visualize their various buckets of money to have different purposes.
Mhm.
Because what ends up happening is that people sometimes are always trying to maximize and they're viewing all their buckets together in regards to maximizing. And by maximizing, I mean growth. The
Mhm.
emergency fund bucket is not meant for growth. So you need
Mm.
to get that out of your mind. It is not a growth bucket. That is not your investing bucket. So I have too many people that are like, oh, I want to invest some of that or whatever. I'm like, well, then it's not your emergency fund bucket. That's your investment bucket. The emergency
That makes
fund bucket
sense.
is there for the emergency, rainy day, something happens and it's urgent.
Mhm.
This is not meant to invest because also people need to take into account that when it comes to investing, the basic rule of thumb is if you need it in 5 years or less, you probably shouldn't invest it. All right. Because the idea with the emergency fund, if you invest it and then say, the market's down and now you need money, now you have less money.
Mhm.
So you need to really think about the specific purpose of each bucket of money that you have and not conflate them all together.
Right. I like that. I because people do get confused or everybody's in the maximizing mindset. And you're right. That's not what the emergency fund is for because it is not an investment of any kind. It's not an investment
No,
vehicle.
it's not an investment, period.
Yeah.
That's not the purpose of your emergency fund bucket.
Yeah.
And I've had that, like, and the conversation comes up more often than not because once you have a decent income and you have more expenses that you're trying to cover, you're going to have a higher emergency fund. So sometimes people are like, I hate seeing $60,000, $70,000
Mm,
sitting there. And I could be investing. And I'm like, that's not the purpose of this bucket. And you
mhm.
need to,
Reshape your mind.
reshape
Yeah.
your mind around that because
Mhm.
most of the time too is that like normally most people's investment vehicles have restrictions to
Yeah.
access. So
Yeah.
if you have this money someplace else and you have a restriction to access it,
And then you're going to
that
pay a
presents another
penalty.
presents another issue.
Yeah.
So it's really the proper mindset and thinking about everything from a planning standpoint as the whole picture and not just an individual segment of it.
Mhm. For people who are listening who are like, "Yep, you're right. I need to start my emergency fund." How do you recommend people get started to where it doesn't feel overwhelming?
This all starts back to the basics of pretty much every conversation we have is understanding your budget.
Okay.
Understanding your cash flow, how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out,
Mhm.
and where can you maybe reallocate some of that money
Mhm.
to better benefit your goals. So you want to understand how much can I comfortably contribute to an emergency fund on a monthly basis. And the only way you're going to know how much you can comfortably contribute is by understanding your budget.
Okay.
There's no way to do it because I don't like the idea of just guessing. Because,
Mhm.
because for example, normally in guessing, you're probably undershooting.
Yeah,
Because if you're like, oh, I can contribute 200 and you're doing it, more than likely you can contribute more.
that's true.
So you want to really take a look at where all your money is going and have a specific amount that you know you can contribute and pushing that. Because also the thing is too is when you're deciding how much you can contribute on a monthly basis, you can obviously then do the math based upon what you're currently contributing, how long it's going to take for you to have a fully funded emergency fund.
Mhm.
And if you want to, speed up that process, you're going to need to contribute more.
Mhm.
But it all comes back to determining how much you can contribute by looking at your budget. Now, with that being said, if you only have $25 to contribute, $20 to contribute, do that.
Mhm.
It is better than doing zero. And I cannot stress enough that something is 1,000 times better than nothing.
Mhm.
And that's where people need to get that head trash out. They're like, oh, I don't have enough. I can't really do anything. I don't care if it's $5. $5 is better than nothing.
Well, and you talk a lot about building the habit. So
Yes.
right now it might be $5 and you can do that monthly. You can automate, we're big on automate what you can so that way it's not another manual task that you have to do. So, whether it's coming straight from your paycheck, once it hits your account, maybe you have it automatically coming out on the
Yeah.
same day every month, etc. But you're building that habit and working that muscle of learning how to automate your savings,
Yes.
and I think that's
Automating is the
important.
key. It's like once you've looked through your budget and you
Mhm.
determine how much you can comfortably contribute to it on a monthly basis, automate it to make it so much easier for you and also to ensure that it happens.
Yeah.
Now, for example, people that maybe have a regular income, that might be a little bit more difficult, but we've also had other episodes where we talk about where maybe you do a little bit less that you know you can do. And then you might have to contribute additional amounts manually when they come in. So, for example,
Mhm.
like, if you're someone that works in a sales position, when you have your commission, your bonuses, maybe you're putting more from those into the emergency funds, but you have to do that manually. But then even, for example, those individuals that are getting larger tax refunds, using that strategically to put towards, building up your emergency fund as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh, the tax refunds. Yeah, please don't go on a shopping spree with those. I mean, that's a whole nother episode of what you can do with your tax
Yeah.
refund. But yeah, and one thing that we had an episode on earlier this year already is Monarch Money. We are loving, loving, loving Monarch. They are not paying us to say that
Yet.
yet. Ah. Hey Monarch, holler at us. We love your app. But Monarch is great, great user interface, great user experience, super easy to set up. You can put all of your accounts in and have a really clean picture of the money that's going in, the money that's coming out. And it'll help you not have to do it manually, right? Because I don't want to live in a spreadsheet. That's not how I like
Most
to
people
operate.
don't. No, there are some weirdos
There
out there.
are people,
I,
no, there are people who
I
love
have
a
some clients that
spreadsheet.
love their spreadsheets,
Yes, yes. And that's fine. You do you,
but they
boo.
also use Monarch. So they like that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And then, I mean, you can look at your cash flow that way and then determine what you can put into your high yield savings account for your emergency fund. I do want to go back and ask you, as people are looking at their expenses, because this is for an emergency, if we're thinking about a layoff, are you calculating expenses for how we're living now with like our housekeeper and the Netflix and the Hulu and the this and the that? Or are
You can
you
tier it.
extracting?
So you can tier it.
Okay.
So, for example, you can kind of determine what
Bare minimum,
you
right?
can you could determine your bare minimum. So let's just say hypothetically your bare minimum is 40,000. So you have that first set goal of like
Mm-hmm.
this is the bare minimum to have the basics of all the things we need, like our utilities, mortgage, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
Car
then you can have a
payment. Yeah.
second tier where like, oh, instead of 40, 50,000 is going to allow us to keep,
Some luxuries, the
some
gym
luxuries.
membership.
And then
Yeah.
or 60,000 is going to allow us to really kind of keep the standard of life that we have and not have to necessarily worry for a certain period of
Mhm.
time. So you can tier it, but like I said, it's first of all defining, what you want that emergency fund to look like.
Yep.
And
Well,
that can vary because some people are, I
mhm.
mean, one of the biggest things is that most people are like, well, if if we both get laid off or something like that, then like obviously we're gonna go bare bones.
Right.
But then sometimes you might have to be who you are real as a person. Is are you gonna be able to just go straight bare bones?
Right. Right.
So you can, like I said, you can tailor that to each individual, and there's
Mhm.
some nuance there.
Well, and we did an episode a while back because I was part of a mass layoff at a Fortune 100 tech company. I did end up on garden leave. I had, a very nice severance. I was very grateful. But our goal was honestly to try to not use the severance and to take that money and put it into our emergency fund. However, we were kind of thinking about, okay, what could we get rid of versus what maybe luxuries would we keep. And one of the things that we landed on was we're going to keep our housekeeper because, I was going to be job searching, I was going to be interviewing, I was going to be prepping, etc. And I can't do anything mentally in a house that is not the way I need it to be. And so keeping our housekeeper was going to ultimately benefit me in my job search and in my, mental capacity and mental planning and all of those things. And so I think even thinking through those things, like I can go without TV. We barely watch TV anyways, but I need a clean house.
And the key thing is we talked about it.
Yes.
So we talked about it and had a plan in place for what that would look like. And
Hmm.
we built our emergency fund and our plan of action around that. And
Right.
like you said, that's a good point to bring up when it comes to the emergency fund is also what type of severance package are you, for the most part, I'm not going to say guaranteed because there's
Yeah.
always that
Nothing.
possibility, but what is a strong possibility of if you did get laid off from your job, do you have a severance package?
Or what does your contract say? Are
Yeah,
you getting 1 month for every year of service? Do you know you're going to get automatic
yeah.
6 months right out the gate? I mean,
Now, what I still like to do in those scenarios is that I still like to base it upon, because like I said, none of those are guaranteed.
right. They're nice
Because,
to
because like
have.
I said, you could have an amazing severance package that's in your contract, but if the company goes under, it
They're
doesn't matter.
gone.
They don't have the money.
Exactly. Yep.
So I always like to base it off of, even if you have a severance package, let's build it as if you don't.
Yes.
And then if something does happen and you do get laid off, you have the
Very
emergency
backup.
fund and you have some extra, but then also we could just bank some of that money to do something else with once you find another job.
Yeah.
So having a little bit more in emergency fund is never going to be terrible in comparison to not having enough.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I feel like we covered most of like the meat.
Yeah.
Are we missing anything?
I wouldn't, like I said, we've already talked about like the main thing as far as where you need to keep it. Do
High yield
not,
savings,
because I
in
I
case
have
that was
met
not
people,
clear.
I have met people who have kept it in their checking account,
Oh my
and it's
gosh.
mm,
In your I
or
listen.
or just like or even just like a regular savings account where you're getting like 0.02%. And I'm like, but you know,
Ooh, let's just very briefly. I'm going to give you like a minute on this. What about the people who have too much in their savings?
yeah. So I did say before, like, having too much is not going to be bad. It's not bad. Okay. It's better than not having enough. However, then it comes into the play where now your money could possibly have been better allocated to grow for you. So, for example, if let's say we're even on the further end, you get 12 months of expenses. Let's just say that equals $100,000, but you have $250,000 sitting there,
That's
and
a
you don't
lot of
have
savings.
anything specific that you're going to do with that additional $150,000 in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now that money is really just losing purchasing power. And what I mean by that is that in order for your dollar today to be worth the same dollar a year from now, it needs to keep up with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with a high yield savings account, you're going to get the highest interest rate you really can on safe money. And by safe money, I mean you don't have a potential of losing it, but you're not going to keep up with inflation. Inflation is still going to be a little bit higher, so you're still quote unquote losing a little bit of money, but you're trying to minimize the amount that you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an additional $150,000 that's just sitting there, you are just losing money because you could have invested that in that time frame,
Right.
and it could have grown for you significantly more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially, I think the important part there is there are people who need 250 or $300,000 in their emergency fund because they have
Yeah,
multiple properties, or like if that
but
is part of what they need for their
yeah.
expenses, then great, have that. But if that is not what your expenses need, then you're ultimately losing money.
Yeah. You could, like I said, it would be better suited to invest that.
What a good
But
problem to
then,
have, though.
but then also, like, I would look at the psychology behind it.
Mm.
You might have to do some internal digging to understand, like, if you possibly know that you don't need this much
And
money
you're
in the emergency
literally just
fund, but you
hoarding
still
it.
have it there, why?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to address that because, like I said, we always talk about also we're big on the behavioral finance aspect, not just the black and white numbers. Like, why are you doing what you do with your money, or why are you not doing what you should be doing with your money?
Yeah,
So you
we
might
have
need to look at
2
that.
great episodes with financial therapists, that you can go back and listen to because there's so much more to our money than just the numbers.
But at the end of the day, I'd much rather have that problem where I have too much money
Sure, of
than
course.
one that I don't have any or
Yeah,
don't have
yeah.
enough.
We're not
So
feeling sorry for you if you have $300,000 sitting in savings and you're like, "Oh, I don't know what to do."
also, one additional call out I want to make for individuals is that, like we said, you should have it in your high yield savings account. But one of the things I often run across is like, oh, well, should I have multiple high yield savings accounts? Because I have one
Mm,
for my emergency fund, but then I have for my other savings. And I'm like, in all honesty, what you should do is choose a high yield savings account such as Ally, which allows you to bucketize. So
yep,
you don't
the
need
buckets.
multiple high yield savings accounts, but you can have one and it has sub accounts, and
Mhm.
you can name the sub accounts. So, for example, if you have $100,000 in total in the account and you're like, I need a $70,000 emergency fund. You can have $70,000 as a bucket for your emergency fund and have it labeled. You can clearly see it as separated. And then the other 30,000, like, I have $20,000 for a home improvement. I have $10,000 for my kids' braces. And you can honestly bucketize those and label them. And,
Vacations,
and I
yeah.
honestly, it sounds silly, but literally that little change, I've done it for so many clients and it's like life changing for them to just be able to
Mm,
see instead of seeing a large lump sum of money and having to internally in their mind determine what the amounts are for, as
yeah.
compared to simply seeing it clearly on a computer screen that like this is what this bucket's for, this is what this bucket's for. You'd be surprised at how much of a mental shift that can have for you.
It's the little tweaks that
Yeah.
make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because seeing, let's say it is $100,000. Let's seeing $100,000 and you're like, "Well, what is that? Okay, that's emergency, that's the pet fund, that's the" it's hard, right? And
Yeah.
then every time you look at that account, you're like doing the mental math of how much goes to this bucket versus that. So just, yeah, create the buckets and label them,
Yeah. And
you
like
know?
also just at the end of the day, like it's the psychological aspect. Like we said before, like you need to really understand what your buckets of money are for
Mhm.
and not conflate all of them together for just simply maximum growth. Emergency fund bucket is not going to make you rich. The idea is that it keeps you from going backwards.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? Again, we've had so many episodes about life insurance, emergency funds, like all these things, all of these protections, they're going to help you sleep better at
Yeah.
night. They're going to help give you a peace and a calm. And that's ultimately what we want for you. We want your money to work for you in a way that you can find peace and clarity and a sense of calm and security that you are missing when you don't have those protections in place. And so remember that every little bit counts. You can go to your employer, see about your payroll. Sometimes you can automate, $20, $25 coming out of your paycheck directly and routing that into your high yield savings so you never even see it. It's automatic. And then the next time you open that account, you're going to be surprised at how much is in it, even when you're only putting in this amount or this amount. It doesn't have to be thousands of dollars a month for it to make a difference. And anything in your emergency fund is better than nothing. So give yourself some grace if it can't be hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a month. That's okay. Build the habit of automation, build the habit of taking a little bit of something from each paycheck and putting it aside for your future self because the emergency will happen.
And this should also be one of your early steps in your financial planning. I want to preface that. I didn't say that before. This should be one of your early
Mm,
steps.
okay. Excellent. Well, we will link our Monarch in the show notes because you can get 50% off for your first year. It's absolutely worth it. We love Ally. We'll be linking that as well. You can use the buckets in Ally, which is really nice. Don't spend, more than 5 minutes finding a high yield savings account. I know that there's people that are like, oh, I'm going to move all my money over here to get an extra 0.5%. And if you want to do that and you have time, that's great. But open up one high yield savings account, designate your buckets, move your money in there,
Be done and move to the next step
and
of your
move to the
plan.
next step of this list of financial to-dos that we're giving you every single week. So don't let it rack your brain, okay? Again, if you have not yet left a 5-star rating or a review, please make sure you do that. It helps other people find our podcast. We know you want to share this message with other people, so thank you in advance, and we will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for listening.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money.